Get out! I'm the president of the HOA, and this building is under my control now. She shrieked at me right in my own ranch office. Then, unbelievably, she called 911 and claimed I was trespassing. When the police arrived, she told them she had legal authority over every property within 100 meters. But while she was busy spouting off about her so-called jurisdiction, she had absolutely no clue what else I actually owned. What she didn't know was about to completely unravel everything she believed. If you've ever dealt with a power-hungry hoe, you'll understand exactly what I'm talking about, because this woman was about to learn a very costly lesson. So there I was, Marcus Thompson, 35 years old, owner of a small agricultural consulting firm, sitting in my ranch office on what should have been an ordinary Tuesday morning. I was on an important video call with a client in Texas, discussing cattle breeding logistics. Behind me were framed photos of the quarter horses I've trained over the years, and just outside the window, my ranch stretched out across the land as something that would soon matter a lot. The morning sun was glowing over the paddocks, casting long golden streaks across the fields. Then, without warning, the calm was shattered by the piercing sound of police sirens. Not just a lone cruiser passing through, but multiple cars, sirens blaring, rapidly approaching. Red and blue lights began dancing off the office walls like I'd been dropped into a police-themed rave. My client, Mr. Johnson from Dallas, looked visibly alarmed as the sound grew louder. "Marcus, are you getting arrested or something?" he asked, half joking, but clearly concerned. "I honestly have no idea what's going on, Mr. Johnson," I replied, trying to stay composed. "Give me just a moment to check this out." As I stood up, my mind ran through every possibility. Maybe there'd been an accident nearby, or a fire. Never did I expect what I was actually about to see. From the window, I watched as two police cruisers parked directly outside my office, lights still flashing like they just responded to a serious emergency. And standing dead center in the driveway, waving her arms like a deranged traffic conductor, was Margaret Whitfield, better known, when she wanted to sound approachable, as Maggie. Maggie was the recently elected HOA president of the Sunset Hills subdivision, a neighborhood that had cropped up about half a mile from my ranch. At 65, retired from a career as an elementary school principal, she had apparently chosen policing her neighbors as her new pastime. Her silver hair was yanked into a bun so tight it looked painful, and her thick glasses made her eyes look like something out of an owl exhibit. Her face was flushed deep red, irradiating a sense of moral outrage. She wore what I could only describe as a power outfit, a black blazer with shoulder pads that screamed 1980s. Frantically, she pointed at my office and shouted to the police, "That man is trespassing on HOA land. He's unlawfully occupying our community office. He's refused repeated orders to vacate. I believe he may be armed and dangerous." Her voice carried loud and clear enough to draw attention from a distance. The officers made their way to my door and knocked with a firmness that made it clear they weren't here for a casual visit. I politely excused myself from the call. Mr. Johnson, now fully invested in the unfolding drama, stared wide-eyed from the video feed. Opening the door, I was greeted by Officer Rodriguez, a young officer who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else than caught in the middle of another neighborhood feud. "Mr. Thompson," he said, "we received a report about someone unlawfully occupying this building and possibly being armed. Can you help us understand what's going on?" His tone was professional, but there was a wariness in it, as if this wasn't his first encounter with an overzealous hoe. "Officer, I'm as baffled as you are," I said calmly. "This is my ranch office, located on my privately owned property, which I've had since 2019. I'm currently in a video call with a client and, no, I'm certainly not armed." I have no clue what Mrs. Whitfield is referring to. Before the officer could respond, Maggie stormed forward, shoving past the others like a linebacker on a mission. Her face had gone from red to almost purple. "Don't believe a word he says," she bellowed. "I'm the president of Sunset Hills HOA. This entire zone falls under our authority. That man is illegally occupying shared community property, and I insist you remove him immediately." She was practically trembling with fury, her spit flying as she shouted. Officer Rodriguez took a breath and addressed her with the patience of a saint. "Ma'am, do you have any documents to show this is HOA property? Also, Can you clarify what kind of weapon you saw? Maggie's eyes darted as she scrambled for a response. I don't need documents. I'm the president. I have full authority over any land within 100 meters of our neighborhood. And a broken bar, and he has horses. Big, dangerous horses. I couldn't help but chuckle softly at that. Apparently, horses were now considered weapons. Pulling out my phone, I accessed my cloud storage, where I kept all my key documents, a habit that was about to come in handy. Officer Rodriguez, I said, here are the property records. These include the deeds and legal documents showing I bought this land, including this office, from the Henderson family back in 2019, long before Sunset Hills was even built. He reviewed the documents and radioed dispatch to confirm the property lines. After a few minutes, he turned back with an expression that said he was done with this nonsense. Dispatch confirms that this is a registered commercial agricultural property under Marcus Thompson. Ma'am, this is clearly his land. There's no crime here, and you are not permitted to misuse 911 for non-emergency civil issues. This is your official warning. Maggie stood there stunned, a mouth opening and closing, completely unable to process that her supposed authority meant nothing here. A small group of neighbors had gathered by this point, many holding up phones to record the entire event. Did she seriously call the cops on land she doesn't even own? Someone whispered, loud enough for everyone nearby to hear. I decided to make it perfectly clear, both for the officers and for the videos that were surely going to end up online. Officer, I said, would you like to see the official land survey? It shows the exact boundary lines between my ranch and the HOA subdivision. I stepped inside and came back with a large laminated map I kept for situations just like this. I laid it across the hood of a patrol car and pointed to the clearly marked zones. As you can see, I explained, this is my ranch, classified as commercial agricultural land, completely independent, and this here 50 meters away is the HOA development. There's no overlap whatsoever. There was absolutely zero legal foundation for the HOA's claims on my property. Maggie's complexion shifted like a malfunctioning traffic light, purple to pale, then blazing red again. This isn't over, Thompson. I know the law. I've studied it. Any property within 100 meters of a residential area falls under HOA control. I'll prove it. Just watch me. By that point, the officers had already had enough and were making their way back to their patrol cars. As Maggie was being escorted off my land, she turned one last time, eyes blazing with fury. You'll regret this, Thompson. I'll show you what real power looks like. This isn't finished. Back inside my office, I unmuted my video call. Mr. Johnson, still on the screen, was grinning like a kid at a carnival. Sorry for the delay, I said with a chuckle. Looks like our new HOA president is a little too enthusiastic about her authority. Johnson let out a hearty laugh. Marcus, that was better than anything on TV. I've seen some wild HOA types in my day, but calling the cops on someone for being in their own office? That's a first. We finished our meeting, but something in the back of my mind told me this wasn't the end of it. I found myself staring out the window at the 2,000 square meter stretch of unused land at the far edge of my ranch. Something about this whole ordeal felt a broken bar calculated. Maggie didn't just want my office. No, she was after something far bigger. And when I told her no to her face 3 months earlier, that's when all of this madness started. What exactly did she want? If you think you figured it out, leave your guess, because trust me, it's wilder than you think. Let's rewind to 3 months before the 911 debacle, to where this whole saga truly began. My ranch sits right at the border where rural farmland meets creeping suburbia. It was once fully countryside until development started pushing closer. I bought the property 5 years ago from the Hendersons, a sweet elderly couple who had run cattle here for 4 decades before they sold everything and moved to Florida. The land spans about 1.2 acres in total. It includes a 2-story ranch office where I run my consulting firm, a high-tech horse stable with 3 stalls and automatic feeding systems, a climate-controlled feed storage building, a beautifully fenced training paddock, and the key piece, a large, vacant 2,000 square meter parcel that I'd set aside for future expansion. But I hadn't just purchased what was visible. I bought everything, a surface, subsurface, and all rights included. That detail would come into sharp focus later. The Sunset Hills subdivision popped up 3 years after I'd established my business. It started as a quiet little development of 30 homes, and for a while, life was peaceful. I ran my ranch, they enjoyed their cul-de-sacs and backyard barbecues, and we all stayed in our own lanes. That harmony came to a screeching halt 6 months ago when Margaret Whitfield moved into the neighborhood. She hadn't even unpacked fully before she threw herself headfirst into community politics, with the zeal of a missionary and the subtlety of a bulldozer. After 3 decades of commanding a classroom as an elementary school principal, it seemed she couldn't function without having someone to boss around. She campaigned for HOA president under a banner of law, order, and community pride, promising to crack down on every violation with zero tolerance. She won the election by just 2 votes, 16-14, and on day 1, she began wielding her new power like a medieval queen. The Joneses were fined for having grass that grew half an inch too long. The Smiths got penalized for putting their trash bins out at 5:59 a.m. instead of 6. The Browns were cited because their garage door wasn't the regulation shade of beige. Then came the Saturday that changed everything. I was in the paddock, working with one of my horses, when a spotless white Lexus pulled up to my gate. Out stepped Maggie, dressed as if she were on her way to broker world peace at the United Nations, followed closely by Carol Jenkins, the HOA secretary. Carol, 62, was a silver-haired woman on the cusp of retirement after 4 decades as an accountant. She looked utterly drained, casting nervous glances at Maggie like a mouse that's learned to watch the cat closely. Maggie, on the other hand, radiated overconfidence. Clipboard in hand like a weapon, she marched toward me with determined purpose. "Mr. Thompson," she announced without the slightest courtesy, "I'm Margaret Whitfield, recently elected president of the Sunset Hills Homeowners Association. I'm here with a business offer that I believe will be mutually beneficial." I invited them inside, keeping up the polite hospitality my grandfather always taught me, offering them Ceylon tea I'd imported from Sri Lanka. Carol admired the office, taking in the polished oak paneling, my framed competition ribbons, and my MBA diploma on the wall. Maggie, however, wrinkled her nose like she just stepped into a pigsty, even though my office was cleaner than most corporate boardrooms. "I'll be direct," Maggie declared, snapping her clipboard open like a courtroom exhibit. "We're interested in acquiring the undeveloped section of your property, the 2,000 square meter lot for use as the future Sunset Hills Community Center. We're prepared to offer $50,000 in cash." I nearly spit out my tea. That land, considering its size and prime location, was worth at least $200,000 and possibly closer to $250,000 depending on the buyer. "I appreciate the offer, Mrs. Whitfield," I said, staying cordial, "but I'm not interested in selling. I've got my own expansion plans for that area." I watched her face cycle through shades of disbelief and outrage like some kind of emotional lava lamp. "You may want to reconsider," she said coldly. "As HOA president, I have ways of making your day-to-day operations far more complicated." I raised an eyebrow. "Was that a threat, Mrs. Whitfield?" "It's just a bit of neighborly advice," she replied, forcing a smile that could curdle milk. She rose abruptly. Carol scrambled after her like an oil sidekick. Just before stepping out the door, Maggie paused and looked back, eyes sparkling with something dark. "You'll regret turning me down, Thompson. Mark my words." Exactly 1 week later, the war officially began. It started with a formal letter delivered on HOA stationery. It was full of lofty phrasing, but the content was utterly absurd. "Dear neighboring ranch, as per Sunset Hills HOA regulations, your business must register as an HOA member and begin paying monthly dues of $500 for continued operation in the shared district." The letter claimed that since my ranch operated within their sphere of influence, I was now subject to HOA guidelines. It went on to say all livestock operations needed to adhere to the 2024 HOA standards for aesthetic harmony. Jake Morrison, my 25-year-old ranch hand who helps me care for the horses, read it aloud and burst out laughing. "Boss, is this woman serious? The HOA's trying to charge you rent for working on your own ranch? What's next, a fee for breathing their air?" Unfortunately, that ridiculous letter was just the opening act in what became a month-long barrage of nonsense. Week after week, My mailbox overflowed with increasingly absurd violation notices. Week 1. I was fined $200 for excessive equine vocalization. Translation: my horses neighed too loudly. Week 2. A $300 fine for an unauthorized barn color. The barn, mind you, had been that same classic red for over 2 decades. Week 3. They cited me for olfactory disturbance due to livestock emissions, a $500 penalty. In plain English, horse manure smells. Week 4. Another $400 fine for unauthorized vehicle idling. The feed delivery truck had parked for 35 minutes. The total fines ballooned into the thousands, each one more ridiculous than the last. The breaking point came one Friday evening around 7 p.m. As I was feeding the horses, I heard multiple engines pulling up and looked toward the gate. Maggie had arrived, flanked by her full committee. Carol was with her, along with 2 HOA board members I hadn't met before. Maggie looked like she just stepped off a red carpet, heels and all. Her bright red designer stilettos sank immediately into the soft pasture soil, but she strutted on like she didn't notice. "Thompson, I need a word with you right now," she shouted across the paddock. I didn't even turn around. I just kept laying out the alfalfa. "I can hear you just fine from here," I replied. "Keep your voice down unless you want to spook the horses." That only made her angrier. "You need to start complying with HOA policies immediately," she snapped. "This is no longer some backwoods farm. This is a civilized neighborhood." "You're right about one thing," I said, finally turning to face her. "This isn't some backwoods operation. It's a licensed commercial agricultural business that's been here 3 years longer than your HOA. It's not zoned residential, and it is absolutely not under your authority." Carol tried to interject quietly. "Mrs. Whitfield, maybe we should take another look at the zoning." Moppa silence. Maggie shouted so loudly Carol flinched. Even the board members took a cautious step back, and my horses shuffled uneasily. "I've studied the law," Maggie growled. "Everything within 100 meters of a residential community falls under HOA rule. This is established precedent." I didn't argue. Instead, I invited them all inside, determined to handle this with documentation, not drama. From my fireproof filing cabinet, I pulled out the official county survey map and spread it across the table under the office lights. "Take a look," I said. "This red line, that's my property. Commercial agricultural zoning. This blue line, that's the HOA Sunset Hills. And this space in between, that's 50 meters of public land. There's no overlap, no ambiguity, no jurisdiction." Maggie stared at the map like it had personally insulted her. "I don't care what your little map says," she snapped. "I'll find a way. You'll see what real power looks like." As she turned to leave, she paused at the window, her gaze locked onto the undeveloped section of my land. Her eyes gleamed not with frustration, but with hunger. "All of this," she murmured, "should belong to the community." To me, after she left, I knew I needed to take precautions. I called Jake over. "Jake, tomorrow I want you to install a full surveillance system," I said. 16 cameras, high definition, night vision, motion detection, a battery backup, the works. He raised a brow. "You think she's going to do something reckless, boss?" "I don't think, Jake," I replied grimly, staring out at that untouched plot of land. "I'm sure of it, and I have a feeling it'll be unbelievably stupid." That very night, my freshly installed cameras captured something that made my stomach turn. Maggie wasn't working alone. And what they did to my property next to Broken Bar. Have you ever seen someone stage an accident just to commit insurance fraud? If so, you already know where this is headed. Because what happened next got me sued for an assault I never committed. It was early, just after 6 in the morning, 1 week after the HOA showdown at the paddock. The fog was thick as soup, clinging low to the ground. A gentle knock on my office door startled me. It was so faint I almost didn't hear it. Checking the camera feed, I was surprised to see Carol Jenkins standing outside, not in her usual prim outfit, but in a worn coat. Her face looked drawn and tired, eyes red and puffy like she'd cried through the night. When I opened the door, her voice was trembling. "Marcus," she said softly, "I need to talk to you. Something terrible happened last night at Broken Bar and I can't keep quiet anymore." I ushered her in and brewed a strong pot of Colombian coffee, of the kind that revives the dead and fortifies the living. She sat down, both hands wrapped around the mug, shaking so hard I thought she might spill it. Maggie called a late-night board meeting at 10 p.m. She said it was an urgent home matter that couldn't wait. But Marcus broken bar, only 3 of us showed up. Me, Maggie, and Harold Peterson. Our bylaws require a quorum of 7 to pass anything, she continued. She didn't care. Then she reached into her purse, pulled out her phone with unsteady hands. I'm retiring next month after 40 years as an accountant. I've never done anything dishonest in my life. But my daughter's a lawyer in Delaware and she told me if I ever witnessed something illegal, I should document it. She hit play. She had recorded the entire meeting, and what I read on the resolution Maggie tried to force through that night. It was so outrageous, so absurd that my hands were shaking with rage just reading it. It read like something straight out of a dictatorship handbook. Emergency Resolution 2024 hours 15 minutes. A 4-meter concrete wall must be constructed around the entirety of Thompson Ranch within 7 days. All livestock activity is prohibited after 6 p.m. Outstanding fines totaling $8,000 must be paid immediately. HOA reserves the right to conduct inspections at any time, with no prior notice. Failure to comply will result in daily fines of $1,500 and immediate legal proceedings. It was signed by Margaret Whitfield, President. Also listed were the names of Carol Jenkins, Harold Peterson, Janet Miller, Robert Kim, and Sandra Davis. I stared at Carol, confused. Boot to broken bar. Carol, this has enough signatures to meet quorum. How is this not valid? Her face drained of color as she explained the deeper deception. Janet, Robert, and Sandra were never there, she said. They weren't even notified. Maggie forced me to forge their signatures. She had copies from their membership forms and made me replicate them. I was reeling from the audacity of it all, but Carol wasn't finished. Marcus broken bar, you need to hear this, she said quietly. You need to understand who we're dealing with. She pulled out her phone and played an audio file. The recording was crystal clear thanks to the wonders of modern smartphones. Maggie's voice filled my office, thick with arrogance and venom. I don't care if we don't have enough board members. Thompson refused my generous offer. Now he'll suffer the consequences. Harold's anxious voice followed. Maggie broken bar, this isn't legal. We can't just illegal. She cut him off. I am the law in this HOA. Carol, record that all 7 members were present. Then Carol's trembling whisper, Mrs. Whitfield, yeah broken bar, I can't. Do you want to lose your job? Remember, I know about your credit card debt. What a shame it'd be if everyone found out the HOA secretary is swimming in bills. Now write what I said. There was a pause. Then, Carol's quiet voice, I'll write it. Maggie's tone turned triumphant. Good girl. Now forge the missing signatures. I have their sample. Let's just make them look real. When the recording ended, the silence in the room was suffocating. Carol sat with tears brimming in her eyes. I'm not proud of what I did, she whispered. But she threatens people. She knows everyone's secrets. A broken bar, and she uses them like weapons. The very next morning, at exactly 5 a.m., Jake called me in a panic. Boss, emergency. You need to come down here. It's bad, real bad. What I saw when I arrived made my skin crawl. Giant red violation notices had been plastered everywhere, on the gates, the fencing, the barn doors, even on my personal truck. They looked like something you'd expect in a government quarantine zone. Screaming dangerous violation in bold lettering. Jake was furious as he shoved his phone toward me. They came around 4 in the morning. I caught the whole thing on camera. 5 people, led by Maggie, and you need to see what they posted online. He pulled up the Sunset Hills HOA community page. It was flooded with photos of my ranch, each one paired with captions that looked like headlines from a smear campaign. Violator Thompson refuses to comply. Dangerous property threatens community safety. Urgent action needed to preserve neighborhood value. But the worst part hadn't even happened yet. That afternoon, while scanning through footage from previous nights, I found something that made my blood run cold. The timestamp read 2 a.m. 3 days earlier. The infrared cameras caught everything clear as day. Maggie, along with 2 men in black hoodies, had snuck onto the property through the rear fence. They crept to the space in front of the horse barn. Maggie checked the surroundings to make sure no one was watching. Then she dramatically dropped to the ground. For 15 minutes, she put on an absurd performance, wincing, groaning, clutching her back and writhing in the dirt like a bad actor in a community play. "Oh, I'll broken bar my back. This place is unsafe. No lighting a broken bar so dangerous," she cried out. The two men took photos from every angle, one even showing her throwing dirt on herself to look more injured. At 2:31 a.m., she stood up normally, dusted herself off, and no kidding high-fived the two men. They laughed and walked off, completely oblivious to the fact that every second had been recorded in HD. Jake stared at the screen, jaw hanging open. "She's trying to fake an injury," he said. "Boss, she's setting you up for a lawsuit." "Worse than that," I said, my voice low and steady. "She's trying to force a sale, or bury me in legal fees until I fold. This is war." I called Robert Smith that same hour. He's a 35-year-old property lawyer from Dallas, and he's handled dozens of HOA cases. After watching the footage and listening to Carol's recording, he was nearly speechless. "Marcus, this isn't just an overreach," he said. "This is criminal. Fraud, forgery, harassment, trespassing, conspiracy." He didn't pause. "We're not just going to fight this, we're going to burn them down in court." And sure enough, that very afternoon, Maggie escalated her madness to a level I didn't think was possible. What happened next was something I couldn't have predicted, not in a million years. At exactly 4:30 p.m., as I was deep in another virtual meeting with a client, those all too familiar sirens screamed through the air once again. Maggie had dialed 911 for the second time, and this call, it made the first one seem almost reasonable. "Emergency. I was seriously injured at the hazardous Thompson Ranch 3 days ago. The owner is blocking me from accessing the property to gather evidence. He's destroying the proof of my injuries. I believe he may be armed and dangerous. Please send backup immediately." But this time, I was prepared. More than prepared. When the officers arrived, I didn't just meet them at the door, I met them with a wall of evidence. Surveillance videos, audio recordings, legal documents. The game had changed. The climax of this saga was coming fast, and Maggie didn't even see it. That same evening, Carol texted me, "I can't stay silent anymore. I'm ready to testify. I have the originals. There's even something about the land you don't know." She had no idea that I, too, had kept one explosive secret, a one that not even my own lawyer knew about. Let's just say, the twist coming next would make HOA history. 2 weeks later, the preliminary hearing arrived like a tidal wave. The county courthouse was packed to the brim. Apparently, HOA drama drew more of a crowd than any reality show on TV. Maggie walked in dressed in a somber black pantsuit that aged her by a decade. The usual smug confidence was gone. Her hands trembled, and her expression radiated panic. Her eyes darted to Carol, who now sat beside me, a steel briefcase on her lap and resolve on her face. I was seated with Robert Smith, my attorney, calm and collected. Behind us, the gallery buzzed with whispers. Neighbors from Sunset Hills had shown up in droves. Frank Davis, Dorothy Miller, and dozens more. The tension was thick enough to cut with a knife. Judge Williams entered, a woman in her 50s known for her zero-tolerance approach to courtroom theatrics. Her eyes swept over the room with the sharpness of a hawk. "You may be seated," she said. "This is the preliminary hearing for the matter of Thompson versus Whitfield and the Sunset Hills HOA. Counsel, proceed." Robert stood with the poise of a seasoned warrior stepping into the arena. "Your Honor, we would like to begin by establishing a consistent pattern of targeted harassment. The defendant has twice called 911 under false pretenses. May we play the recordings?" The first 911 call echoed through the courtroom. "There's a trespasser in the HOA ranch office. He won't leave. He might be armed." The crowd snickered. Judge Williams gave one sharp rap of the gavel, restoring order. Then came the second call. "I was injured at the Thompson Ranch. He's hiding the evidence. He's dangerous. Send SWAT if necessary." A loud whisper from the back rang through the room. "A SWAT team up for a horse ranch." Another bang of the gavel. But this time, I caught a flicker of a smile on Judge Williams' lips. Robert continued, "We now present high-definition video from my client's security system, recorded the night of the 15th. On the big courtroom monitor, night vision footage lit up the room in crisp, eerie clarity. There, for all to see, was Maggie sneaking onto the property, carefully lowering herself to the ground, moaning like she was auditioning for a low-budget drama. The silence in the courtroom was electric. Judge Williams leaned forward, her brows arched. "Miss Whitfield," she asked dryly, "care to explain this performance?" Maggie leapt to her feet, flustered and red-faced. "That's not what it looks like. I did fall. That video's fake. I generated." "Deepfake?" The judge didn't flinch. "Deepfake? In 4K, with time-stamped footage from a locked security system? I think not." "Sit down, Miss Whitfield." Then came Carol's moment. She took the stand without hesitation, hand on the Bible, voice steady and sure. "I'm Carol Jenkins, and I served as secretary of the Sunset Hills HOA. I'm here today to tell the truth about what I witnessed and what I was forced to do." Robert gently guided her testimony. "Tell us about the meeting on the night of the 14th, Mrs. Jenkins." She inhaled deeply. "Maggie called an emergency meeting at 10 p.m. Only 3 of 7 board members showed up, half are below quorum. Still, Maggie forced me to fabricate the minutes and forge the signatures of the 4 absent members." She opened her briefcase, laying out the original documents. "These are the fake meeting minutes. All the signatures are mania under coercion. Any handwriting expert can confirm it." Then came the audio. Every word, every threat, every manipulation played loud and clear for the courtroom to hear. The final nails in Maggie's coffin. But Carol wasn't done. "There's more, Your Honor. Over the last 6 months, the HOA has documented $10,000 in administrative expenses." "But I file." A ripple of gasps spread through the gallery. Now it was time. Robert stood with theatrical precision. "Your Honor, let us now address the central issue, the supposed HOA authority over my client's land. Miss Whitfield claims jurisdiction over Thompson Ranch. But the reality is far, far different." I stood, carrying a leather portfolio with documents no one, not even Roberta, had yet seen. "Your Honor," I began, steady and measured, "when I bought this ranch in 2019, I didn't just purchase the land and buildings visible today. I acquired the interior. I purchased the entire parcel from the Henderson family back in 2019 at all 1.5 acres of ITA, including the 2,000 square meter stretch of land that the Sunset Hills HOA had falsely labeled as abandoned public property. That same parcel Maggie had claimed would house her grand community center, the same land she had been fundraising for, convincing neighbors to donate their hard-earned money." The courtroom erupted. Maggie jumped to her feet like she'd been shocked. "No, that's not possible. That land belongs to the HOA." Unfazed, Robert calmly handed the deed and official title documents to Judge Williams. "Your Honor, these are from the county recorder's office. They confirm without question that my client, Mr. Thompson, has held legal ownership of the entire property, including the disputed land, since 2019. Gasps echoed through the courtroom. Dorothy Miller shouted, "Maggie told us that was whole land." Frank Davis rose beside her, visibly shaken. "She collected donations for it." "I gave $500. Judge Williams reviewed the documents in silence, then addressed the room with steely clarity. "These documents are indisputable and legally binding. Mr. Thompson is the rightful owner of the full parcel." I looked straight at Maggie and delivered the line I had rehearsed for weeks. "Your Honor, I don't just own my ranch officia. I own the land Margaret Whitfield has been trespassing on. I own the land she promised to residents. She's been selling fantasies about property that was never hers to offer." The judge nodded. "Based on the overwhelming evidence of false emergency reports, forged documents, and fraudulent fundraising, Ms. Whitfield has clearly engaged in harassment, misuse of emergency services, and fraud. Mr. Thompson's property rights are absolute. Miss Whitfield is ordered to remain at least 500 feet from Thompson Ranch until further notice." She paused, then added with gravitas, "Furthermore, the district attorney's office will review this case for potential criminal charges, including fraud and embezzlement." The gavel came down with a final, echoing crack. Maggie sat frozen, pale and trembling, her fantasy of domination crumbling before her eyes. But she wasn't done, not yet. The judge's words about criminal charges pushed her beyond the brink. Her next move wouldn't just be desperate, it would be unforgivable. That evening, at 6 p.m., the Sunset Hills Community Center buzzed with energy. Residents flooded the room for an emergency HOA meeting. The air was thick with anger and betrayal. Frank Davis, calm but visibly furious, stepped up to the podium. "Friends, Neighbor said we now know the truth. Margaret Whitfield lied. She forged documents, staged a fake injury, stole thousands from our community, and tried to sue our neighbor under false pretenses. She has disgraced this office. I move that she be immediately removed as HOA president. A chorus of voices shouted. Seconded. Dorothy Miller, her voice trembling with rage, stood. I gave $500 for a community center on land Maggie never even owned. I want my money back. How many others did she con? Hands flew into the air all across the room. Then, like a scene from a bad soap opera, the doors slammed open. Maggie stormed in, her mascara streaked like war paint, her once perfect hair a chaotic mess, and the unmistakable scent of alcohol trailing behind her. You traitors, every last one of you. I am your president. I was elected. Frank stood firm. We're, Maggie, past tense. We're voting you out right now. Even Harold Peterson, her loyal board member until that day, rose and faced her. Maggie, I was wrong to support you. You've gone too far. Her face contorted with fury. You too, Harold, you spineless worm. Fine, but don't forget I know things. I know secrets about all of you. Frank raised his hand. All in favor of removing Margaret Whitfield as HOA president? 79 hands went up. Only one hand stayed down. Maggie's. Frank's voice was final. Motion carried. Margaret Whitfield, you are no longer president. You are required to surrender all HOA property and records immediately. Maggie let out a crazed laugh. Never. I'd rather burn it all to the ground. She wasn't joking. Security had to drag her out, screaming and flailing. 2 nights later, at 3 a.m., I was jolted awake by a frantic call from Jake. Boss, fire. The feed storage building, it's burning. I raced to the ranch to find smoke rising into the night sky. Thankfully, the automated sprinkler system had activated, keeping the fire from spreading. The fire department was already on the scene. Fire Chief Johnson surveyed the charred remains. Mr. Thompson, this wasn't an accident. There's clear evidence of accelerants. This was arson. Then he asked to review the security footage. And once again, my cameras delivered. The grainy night footage showed Maggie parking on a side road at 2:47 a.m. At 2:58, she crept across the field, a red gas can in hand. At 3:03, she circled the feed building, pouring gasoline in wide arcs. At 3:04, she struck a match. But at 3:05, the sprinklers roared to life, soaking her from head to toe. Then came the moment that nearly broke Jake from laughing. Maggie, slipping in mud, dropped her wallet, a broken bar, and her driver's license. Fire Chief Johnson shook his head in disbelief. In 30 years, I've never seen a criminal this incompetent. She literally left her ID at the scene. By 7 a.m., police had surrounded Maggie's home. Half the neighborhood gathered to watch as she was led out in a pink bathrobe and fuzzy slippers, handcuffed and hysterical. This is a setup. Thompson framed me. I'm the victim. As the squad car pulled away, applause broke out from the crowd. 2 weeks later came the criminal trial. And Maggie? Well, a broken bar. Let me know when you're ready for the final act. Maggie appeared for her sentencing in an orange jumpsuit, utterly defeated. Her usual arrogance had vanished, replaced by a hollow, haunted stare. The charges were stacked high: harassment, filing false police reports, fraud, attempted arson, embezzlement, forgery, and criminal trespassing. Guilty on all counts. Judge Williams didn't hold back. Margaret Whitfield, your actions display a flagrant disregard for the law, for truth, and for the rights of others. This court sentences you to 18 months in county jail, $30,000 in restitution to Mr. Thompson, $8,000 repayment to the HOA, $5,000 to the defrauded donors, 200 hours of community service, a lifetime ban from any HOA leadership positions, and mandatory anger management counseling. Maggie broke down sobbing, but karma wasn't done. In order to pay her fines, she had to sell her home, her prized property. The final twist: I bought it, $20,000 below asking price. She had no choice but to accept the offer. On moving day, as I oversaw renovations with contractors on the porch, she screamed from the sidewalk, "Enjoy my house, you monster." I didn't flinch. I will. It'll make a great guest house. 6 months later, Maggie was released early for good behavior and community service. Her assignment: highway cleanup. right in front of my ranch. Every Saturday at 7 a.m., she was out there in an orange vest, picking up trash. Jake never missed a chance to wave as he drove past. Morning, Madam Former President. Beautiful day for service. Carol, now my trusted property manager, occasionally brought her water. Stay hydrated, Maggie. Wouldn't want you passing out. It wasn't cruelty, it was kindness, and somehow, that stung more than insults ever could. Later that month, Frank Davis stopped by to talk about the $12,000 residents had donated for the community center Maggie had never had the right to build. Keep it, I told him. Use it for something real. Just promise me next time, don't build on land you don't own. He shook my hand, eyes shining with gratitude. You're a bigger man than most, Marcus. But the story wasn't quite over. There was still that 2,000 square meter strip of land, the piece Maggie had coveted most. 6 months later, I did something unexpected with it, something that made the entire story come full circle. I transformed it. It had once been the focal point of Maggie's grand plan for control and prestige. Now, it was a symbol of everything she had failed to understand. I built Freedom Park, a gift to the community, a tribute to unity, a rejection of ego. But this wasn't just a park, it was a purpose-built therapeutic space designed for inclusion and healing. There was a fully accessible playground for children with disabilities, complete with sensory features and adaptive swings, a fragrant sensory garden filled with lavender, mint, and calming herbs offered solace and quiet for children on the autism spectrum. Picnic pavilions, shaded seating, and an exercise trail encouraged families to gather, neighbors to connect. And at the heart of it all stood a gleaming bronze plaque, 3 feet wide by 4 feet tall, Freedom Park, where greed tried to take root, generosity blooms. Where lies were told, truth prevails. Where one sought control, a community found unity. This land coveted through deception is now given freely, in celebration of justice, integrity, and neighborly love. Donated to the Sunset Hills community by Thompson Ranch, 2025. Beneath it, a smaller plaque read, "Special thanks to Carol Jenkins, a whistleblower with a conscience." On opening day, more than 200 people came, neighbors, friends, former skeptics, all now allies. Frank Davis gave a heartfelt speech about the power of transparency. Dorothy Miller organized a bake sale to support ongoing park maintenance. Carol Jenkins stood beside me, tears of joy in her eyes. I didn't mention Maggie in my speech. I didn't need to. The land itself told the story now. But I saw her, in the crowd, sunglasses, hoodie, head down, fresh out of jail, required by court to complete her community service. She stood in silence as I announced that Freedom Park would remain forever protected by a conservation easement, legally untouchable, immune to future development. That's when something inside her seemed to crack. Maggie began to cry, and not tears of rage or frustration, but the tears of someone who finally understood what they had lost. She had been so obsessed with control, so consumed by the need for power, that she'd missed the chance to be part of something truly good. She slipped away before anyone noticed. But I had seen her, and I genuinely hoped that maybe, just maybe, she had learned something. Carol had. She was no longer the fearful, hesitant woman from those early meetings. She now ran our therapeutic writing program with fire and compassion, inspired by the experience of raising a granddaughter with special needs. "Marcus," she told me one morning, watching kids ride horses with beaming faces, "you gave me a second chance when I didn't deserve one. Now I get to give second chances to others." In her honor, she created the Second Chances Fund, a grant to help struggling locals get back on their feet. The first recipient, Harold Peterson, the last ally of Maggie Whitfield, now rebuilding his life one step at a time, right here at Thompson Ranch. And that's how it ended, or maybe, how it truly began. Harold Peterson now worked as our maintenance supervisor, rebuilding both fences and his reputation. "Everyone deserves redemption," Carol often said. "I got mania and I'll keep paying it forward." Under Frank Davis' leadership, the newly restructured HOA became a model for integrity. Monthly financial reports were posted online. All meetings were recorded and live-streamed for transparency. Term limits were instituted to prevent power hoarding. and most importantly clear boundaries were set to define the HOA's true authority. Marcus taught us something valuable, Frank announced at one meeting. Respect for property rights is the foundation of good neighbors. We're here to serve the community, not rule it. When the question came up whether Thompson Ranch should remain under HOA jurisdiction, the vote was unanimous, forever exempt, with a formal apology issued for the past overreach. But nothing from this saga became more iconic than the massive sign I erected at the ranch entrance, 12 feet wide, 8 feet tall, and glowing 24/7. It quickly became a roadside attraction, Thompson Ranch AEST. 2019. This is a free zone where horses run free, and so do we. Everyone welcome, except those who call 911 on property owners. Lifetime ban list. Margaret Whitfield HOA President 2024. Crimes, false police reports, fraud, arson, being a Karen. P.S. If you're reading this, Maggie. It doesn't smell that bad after all. The sign went viral. #HOA free zone trended nationwide. People drove in from nearby towns just to take selfies with it. My inbox filled with horror stories from people across America dealing with HOA nightmares of their own. One afternoon, as I wrapped up a writing lesson with a group of special needs kids, Carol approached, waving an envelope. Someone left this at the gate. No name a broken bar, but I think you'll know who it's from. Inside was a handwritten letter, unmistakable in its careful script. Marcus, I won't ask for forgiveness. I don't deserve it, but I need to say this. You were right about everything. Greed blinded me, power corrupted me, jail humbled me, seeing Freedom Park a broken bar, seeing the people smile. This is what I could have helped build, if I hadn't been so obsessed with control. I'm moving to Puerto Rico to live with my sister. No HOAs there. Thank you for showing me the cost of hate and the value of grace. And a broken bar, yeah, the manure doesn't actually smell that bad. I folded the letter and handed it to Carol. Maybe people can change, she said softly. Maybe, I agreed, but the sign stays. Some lessons are worth remembering permanently. Our monthly community BBQs had become a cherished tradition. Frank manned the grill. Dorothy's potato salad had reached mythical status. Kids rode ponies for free. Adults swapped stories that usually started with, "Remember when Maggie a broken bar?" At one BBQ, a newcomer asked who this infamous Maggie was. Little Bobby, now 8, wise beyond his years, offered the perfect summary. She tried to take stuff that wasn't hers. Mr. Marcus taught her how to share. As the sun dipped below the horizon, I often sat atop the hill overlooking Freedom Park, sipping tea with Carol. No regrets? She'd ask. None, I'd reply. Every battle teaches you something. And forgiveness? She'd probe gently. Forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting, I said. That's why the sign stays. Freedom requires vigilance, and a little humor makes the truth easier to swallow. I saddled up midnight, the quarter horse I'd rescued the year before, and rode the familiar loop, past the guest house that used to be Maggie's sanctuary, through Freedom Park, where children's laughter echoed, along the HOA boundary line, where I waved to Frank, Dorothy, and others, and always past that brilliant, legendary sign. As dusk settled, my phone buzzed with a video message. It was from a fellow rancher in Florida. Bro, you won't believe this, he said, panning the camera to a patrol car parked outside his property. Our HOA president just called the cops on my pet duck, claims it violates some kind of a waterfowl ordinance. Can you help? I burst out laughing, steering midnight toward home. Maggie may have been Gandhi, but her spiritual successor had arrived. And the next chapter? Oh, it's wilder than you can imagine, because that HOA president didn't just call the cops. They called the FBI, the CIA, and animal control about a duck named Gerald. Smash that subscribe if you want to hear how I helped a Florida rancher take down an HOA president who thought ducks were communist infiltrators. And comment your city if your HOA needs to be exposed next. Because let's be real, a broken bar Maggie, she was just the qualifying round in the HOA Crazy Olympics.